So we're here in Los Angeles, Hollywood, baby.
Why are you saying it like that?
I don't know. Try to be like a movie star. Oh my God.
Well, you're
I'm
not
like a movie star. Okay, I'm like totally Scottish. Anyways, we're here in Los Angeles because we're spending some time up here working on film. But you know what's been totally wild is actually adventuring around a new city, right? Most people think of LA as this metropolis, tons of traffic, which of course it is. But oh my God, it's freaking beautiful, isn't it?
It really is. I'm amazed when you say, oh, we're going to spend some time in LA. Or they're like, oh, why would you do that? Oh, it's awful. It's just cars and freeways. And there are that. But there's some amazing trails and some of the best bike rides I've ever been on in my life. So what adventures as an XTERRA athlete are you planning on having in LA?
Ooh, I am going to run the famous Santa Monica stairs. Let me tell you, people, you've got to try that. It's incredible. You'll see every poser out there.
It's like 300 wooden stairs or something, aren't there?
Yep. But maybe that wasn't the adventure you're thinking of. We have a more serious adventure on today. Adventurous.
We have a great one today.
Welcome to the XTERRA Podcast. XTERRA is a global brand that champions the outdoor endurance enthusiast in their pursuit of relentless adventure. For over 25 years, XTERRA has been the home of authentic race experiences and trail-tested gear for your journey, all to help you live more. I'm your host, Dr. Simon Marshall, a performance psychologist, and I'm here with my co-host and pint-sized wife, Lesley Paterson, a professional triathlete with 5 world titles to her name.
Hey, wait a minute. How come you get to do the intro?
Well, I knew you were going to ask that. Well, it's just that you're kind of hard to understand sometimes.
What, because I'm Scottish?
Well, yeah, sort of.
That is so typical of the bloody English. Oh, whatever, man. So, wherever you're from, if you're a fan of outdoor endurance adventure sports, you've come to the right place. We talk everything from training your body and mind for outdoor shenanigans to gear, expeditions, travel and culture.
Let's get started.
He's called Ray Zahab, and he's a Canadian adventurer, ultra-distance runner. He's done so much. But we came across Ray. We were staying in Canada. Lesley was having some treatment just outside of Montreal. And our homestay there, Tanya Deeks, a triathlete, she said to us, oh, you're interested in adventure? And we're talking about our podcast. You have to speak to Ray Zahab. He's like Canadian royalty in the adventure world. And as we started to learn about Ray, we were hooked on him. The guy is kind of crazy, the stuff he does, but he's managed to combine all of his adventures with an educational mission and a non-profit to get more young people interested and engaged with the outdoors. It's really quite remarkable. He's a recipient of the Meritorious Service Cross of Canada. He's an explorer with the Royal Canadian Geographic Society. He's a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society. And he's just a damn nice guy. And I think you'll really enjoy this talk we've got with him today.
You know, you're pretty crazy. What got you into this and what draws you to such extremity?
Well, you know, it's interesting. To me, I mean, if we start the conversation of where I'm at today and what it is that I do, exploration is my full-time gig. I mean, this is what I do for a living. And to me and to my family, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's normal, but I mean, for lack of a better term, I try not to emphasize that too much in my own head, right? So even in and around my kids, I mean, they know what I do and they understand what I do. I have 2 daughters, 11 and 8. They're wicked skiers, trail runners. My wife is a ultra runner, among other things. And so in our family, we keep things normal from that perspective. So like any of these magazines I have or awards or blah, 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 records, it's all tucked away in a filing cabinet. It's not up on my wall. It's not something that is out in front of us. Yeah, there's some few pictures around from expeditions, but that's about it. And I started the journey a very different person. And there's a part of that person that I still try to maintain today with things that I'm doing. You know, I was former pack-a-day smoker, unhealthy person, you know, ultra partier turns ultra distance runner, right? But I mean, you know, I didn't start all of this until I was 30 years of age. And it wasn't because I wanted to be an ultra distance athlete. It was because I simply wanted to find happiness and purpose in my life. And I am very fortunate to have a younger brother. Incidentally, I've found on this journey through sharing the story for 20 years that sometimes, many times in our lives when we're looking for inspiration, a lot of times it comes from people that have been around us our entire lives. And we just all of a sudden, when you need them, they're there and you look at them differently. And so that was my brother. And he's this amazing endurance athlete, Ironman triathlete, etc. And I was very inspired by the confidence he was taking from the things he was doing. And so I decided that I had nothing to lose at that time in my life, but to try and be like him, or at least feel like him. And so the most sensible thing it seemed to me to do would be to do the things that he does. And that's how it started.
Have you found, given it's been quite a long time you've been into this type of lifestyle, have you found that, I guess, the addiction piece of it really fascinates me? You know, as an athlete that's been in the sport for a long time and couldn't imagine life without it, it's been both a blessing and a curse, right? It's both my therapy, as it seems it is to you, but it's also my undoing, in that if I don't have it, I kind of go insane, and the upheaval that goes on in my family life, and certainly, Simon can attest to that.
I can attest to that.
Yeah, it can send other people crazy to try and keep this world going, because what we do is not quote unquote normal.
Well, I mean, listen, I hear you and I understand everything that you're saying. There are certain parts of it. Our life is adventure-based in our family. And like I say, it's my full-time job. So, I mean, and everything I do peripherally from this life of adventure, like supporting my foundation, Impossible to Possible, or any of the other work I do, comes from the adventures that I do, right? But, I've looked at it from the perspective of somebody who didn't start anything. I wasn't a lifelong athlete. So I started doing stuff when I was 30. When I first started racing mountain bikes and doing adventure races. And then I moved into ultra running. And the very first running race I ever did, period, was a 100-mile running race in the Yukon, and I won it. And I'd never won anything in my entire life. And it was such a range of emotions when I did that race. It felt great to win something, but truth be told, it taught me that human beings underestimate what they're capable of doing. And it didn't necessarily mean that running would be my life. It would turn into, obviously, my life. At the time, it was just what I took from it, right? What I learned from it, the confidence and the capacity to take a risk or to follow through and do amazing shit. And what I found so incredible is it's in every single person to find something extraordinary in your life. I mean, everybody's capable of something extraordinary, whether it's in the arts or it's sports or whatever it is, right? So it's how you find passion in life that is the determiner.
But before you got into that, did you have any of were the breadcrumbs there of this sort of adventurer spirit waiting to be unearthed at the age of 30, or you really didn't have any desire to do sort of extreme activities like this as a kid or as a young adult?
Well, I don't think it's even extreme activities or adventure, right? Like, what I'm fascinated in is what were you like as a kid in terms of your behavior, because the way that you've applied yourself, it's not like,
phenomenal, right?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's not like every person is going to have the desire or wherewithal to get out there and do what you've done, right? So did you exhibit some of those traits when you were younger?
Well, listen, I grew up on a hobby farm in a very small town, amazing friends, amazing family, but in school, it was like if I could get a C, I was rocking it. I was not, after elementary school, high school was kind of a downhill spiral educationally, academically. And so, I barely got out of high school, and then I went to community college and I didn't finish. And so, no, I would say breadcrumbs, I would always find something that I enjoyed doing, whether it was partying and going to concerts or whatever. From the capacity to be able to apply oneself. I think that's the sort of undiscovered nugget that every person has, right? It's when you really challenge yourself in anything that you're doing that really you see what a human being's able to do. I'll give you a case in point. You see some of these, the Ironman, because you guys are triathletes, right? So the Ironman footage of people crossing the finish line. They are collapsing right across the finish line. There was one really famous video. I can't remember the athlete's name. And she basically crawled across the finish line. I think she might have been Kona one year. I can't remember. Anyhow, in practice and in training, that probably wouldn't happen, right? But in that moment, right, when everything counted, she was able to rise to that challenge and exceed any physical, mental, or emotional limit that she had to be able to cross that finish line. So I think that it's less about looking for clues in the past, and it's more about what we take in the present and where we go from there, the things that we learn that are opened up to us when we challenge ourselves. And then, then you've got the breadcrumbs. Then you're like, whoa, I can't believe I did that.
Right,
what if I do this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. So the catalyzing moment, I think that's the thing that I'm fascinated by as well, because many people, they look at people like you and Lesley to a certain extent, even in sport, and they're like, oh, I could never do that. Or that just seems so far from the kind of fiber of how I'm built. And so your story of actually starting with a really pretty sedentary life and actually having some habits that were really unhealthy, like smoking a pack a day and so on. But the catalyzing moment, was it you looking at your brother and doing Ironman and thinking, I could do that? Or was it sort of something that percolated for a while and then it just tipped you over the edge to saying, okay, Ray, get your shit together. I need to have a better life, a version of my life than the one I'm living now.
And really, it was kind of like, when you're telling a story on a podcast, you're summarizing years of life, right? Like when I first made the decision to do this, it was like late 96, early 97. I decided, I looked at my brother and I was like, wow. I mean, that dude is like, that's pretty rad, the stuff he's doing. Took me until New Year's Eve 99 to smoke my last cigarette, right? So it took me 3 years, basically. I mean, I would have 1 foot in the pool and 1 foot out, basically. I'd go out mountain biking with my brother and then I'd go home and party and smoke still, right? But I remember those days looking at him and being so fascinated by how he just exuded a confidence level that said he had his shit together. Like he knew what he was doing. And all I knew is I wanted to be that. So whatever, like I was all in. I was going to be all in. I just knew that I had to try. And to be honest with you, I didn't really have much to lose at that point. So I was like, what the hell? Right? What the hell? It's the same thing when I entered the Yukon Arctic, the first running race that I did, the first ultramarathon I did. I really had no idea what was going to happen. And then when we set foot across the Sahara Desert, I remember thinking of 7,500K. I remember thinking to myself, there's no way I'm going to make it. Like, I can't tell these other two guys, my buddies. I can't tell them. But it's just not going to happen. And once I got halfway, I thought, what the hell? I'm going all the way to the pyramids. And so you learn through process and doing. And it becomes not easier, but you could become practiced at taking risks, and you become practiced at being able to commit to the risk.
And I think, there's got to have been just some absolutely dark moments during some of these expeditions and some amazing, enlightening ones. I would love to know what was one of your darkest moments?
When I ran the length of the Atacama Desert in Chile, I did it in the middle of summer, 1,200 kilometers, north to south, solo. I had limited resupplies because I was navigating mostly off-road through mountains and salt flats. And it was a combination. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I'd be on a road, but it was occasional mining road, like these gravel cuts that would go through the desert. But most times they weren't going in the direction I needed to go. And so I would go long periods of time without a resupply, anywhere between 20 and 50 kilometers at a time. It was 55 degrees Celsius is what it peaked out at. The wind was always in my face. And because of the lack of UV protection there, I was wearing long sleeves, gloves. I was burned to a crisp. And I can remember one day in particular when I was crossing a mine. And these mines are massive, and they're not operational, some of them in the desert out there. They just exist. The mines own the property, so to speak, right? And it could be thousands and thousands of acres that they own. So yeah, I'm running across this mine, unbeknownst to me that I was running across and I get to where my waypoint on my GPS said that my next water resupply would be. And this was at about 30 kilometers. It was blistering hot. And my team wasn't there. So I pulled my sat phone and I said, hey, are you guys anywhere near dropping that water? Because they were out in a Land Cruiser, I assume, trying to cross some dry riverbed or get to me somehow. And they got back to me and they said, hey, man, you're in a mine and they won't let us in. And so I had a choice to stop there or keep moving to a point where I thought perhaps they could access me. So I went another 20 kilometers with no water. And I literally thought I was going to die. And I sat down in the desert and I thought, I'm going to totally bake out here. And I had supplies. I had everything I needed. I had emergency supplies other than the water because I drank it all. So I had an emergency blanket that I pulled out and I used as a shade, attempt at getting some shade. and could feel myself just kind of slipping into unconsciousness. I was so overheated. And then I heard the hum of the four-wheel drive. I could see a plume of dust way off in the distance, and I knew it was the guys. And so that was a super close call, but I really felt horrible that day. I've also broken through ice in the Arctic and almost been washed down rivers under the ice. And I've had a lot of crazy things happen, but a lot of great things happen too.
And so you talk a lot about confidence. Is it just the act of resourcefulness or getting through these tough moments that has given you this confidence? Or is it just dealing with the inner demons, emotions that come with all of this? What is it you feel that gives you the confidence?
I think it's the same thing as the person who's going to go do Ironman Lake Placid for the first time, and they're online and they want to hit the entry button. And they know once they hit that entry button, they're committed. They've put it out there. And so they're sitting there and they're going back and forth in their mind. Should they do this? Can they do this? Should they do this? They can't do this. There's no way I can do this. Enter, purchased, right? And you're in. And so when you take that first step, or you take a chance, or you take a risk, right, it starts to beget confidence. You learn to believe in yourself a little more. Like, I spent 30 years of my life talking myself out of ever trying anything new because I was afraid of failure, and I was afraid of what other people would think of me in those failures. Like, I actually cared more about what other people thought than what I thought about myself. And then when I started doing these things, I started to realize that these are very personal goals. You have to do it because you want to do it. And when you are taking risks and when you're putting yourself out there and you're taking more chances at these things, you grow a confidence in yourself, not to please or satisfy others, but to grow as an individual. So the first time that person enters the Ironman and they're looking at the thing and they're hemming and hawing, well, they do the Ironman, and then the next one, how long do you think it takes them to enter it? They press the button and they're in. So it's because they know they did it. You know, what's the thing they say about getting to the start is sometimes the hardest thing, right? For many factors.
Absolutely. I mean, so, and outside of the sort of the near-death experiences, which sound traumatic and really tough to cope with, but there's sort of the long stretches of monotony and boredom when you are, I mean, you know, when you're running 7,500 kilometers across the Sahara, not a day break in 111 days of running. What kinds of games do you play in your own head? You had other runners with you, but I imagine you're not doing that much talking with one another. What sort of things are you thinking or trying to occupy your brain with as you sort of, put one foot in front of the other?
Well, you know, since the Sahara, I mean, I think I'm somewhere between 14 and 15,000 kilometers now on foot across deserts, Arctic regions, Antarctica, etc. And on those days, I'm thinking, those long days that you're talking about, I'm thinking of one of two things. It's either food that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the food I'm going to eat at camp, if there's a camp, or the food that I have, if I'm unsupported and self-contained, the food that's in my sled that I'm dragging that I'm going to eat. Or, you know, my other strategy is that I relive a day in my life at home with my family and with my daughters and my wife, and every step becomes a step in my day. So, you know, I get out of bed, I walk to the bathroom, I brush my teeth. How long does it take me to brush my teeth? Then I go downstairs, make my coffee, have my coffee. How long does that take? Well, there's an hour right there, right? Gone out of the day while I'm running. And I live the minutia of my days at home. And time just slips away in chunks.
That's really interesting. And you never listen to music or podcasts?
Oh, yeah. I listen to music mostly. If I'm listening to stuff, I'll listen to music, and now I'll listen to your podcast. I'll add that to it. But I most of the time I'm in the moment, in the place that I'm in, and I use music for the tougher times. But, you know, I love being in these remote places on foot. So I want to experience as much of it as I possibly can.
And I think that's what struck me, actually, was when you do these adventures, you're into amazing places in terms of the scenery, but it's a culture. It's meeting people that you ordinarily would never have met before. And I'm intrigued by that.
It's become the primary focus. There are people literally everywhere on this planet. Granted, there are sections of the planet that are very inhospitable and almost unlivable. So, yeah, there'll be vast areas where there isn't anyone, but more or less there's someone everywhere. And it's just meeting new friends and staying in touch with the people that I meet so far away, like random interactions. When I ran across the Gobi Desert, it was over 2,000 kilometers, ran it solo, again, the same style as the Atacama, limited resupplies. And I was going cross-country at one point. I think I was 30 kilometers between resupplies. And I was in the southern part of Mongolia. So I crossed from the eastern side of Mongolia to the western side, to the Altai Mountains, to the desert. And I'm running, and way off in the distance, I could see a yurt. And as I'm running along, I see also way off in the distance, because you can see forever, I saw this person riding towards me, sort of like they weren't coming to me, but they were riding in my direction on a horse. And it was like a Mongolian cowboy, right? Well, as this lady approached me, it was a cowgirl, a cowwoman. And so we just stopped, like our tracks intersected. I mean, randomly in the middle of Mongolia. We're the only two people in this vast wilderness for I don't know how far around. And so I said, hey there, not anticipating a response because I found nobody that spoke English. And she immediately, she responded and said, hey, what are you doing out here? And I said, well, you speak English? And she said, yeah, I went to school in the UK. And so what are you doing here? She goes, I came back to take over my family's ranch, like semi-nomadic, right? So half the year in one end of Mongolia, half the year in the other end. And I said, that's amazing. And she said, yeah. She goes, I said, well, what drew you back? Was it because it was your parents? And she said, no. She goes, I miss these massive open spaces. She said, look around you. She said, there's no other place like this. The grasslands mixed with the desert. And she loved where she lived, and she loved the lifestyle that she had. It's a much longer story, but there's just one example of someone extraordinary that I met,
And I think that's what's such a shame about sort of the upcoming youth of today, right? I'm not sure how much traveling is being done. Certainly when you live here in America like we do at the moment, right? You see all of these young kids not really getting to experience a lot of different cultures because it's so expensive and so hard to travel. So I'm intrigued by, this charity that you've set up and what you're doing to get young people out there experiencing all of this and going on this journey.
Yeah, and that was exactly what you're saying. That's one of the missions of Impossible to Possible. So we've done, I'm going to take a stab, but I think we've done 15 youth-based expeditions thus far since we founded the organization in 2008. And basically what we do is take 16 to 21-year-olds on learning-based expeditions around the world, and it's 100% free of charge. So they go to places like Bolivia, Peru, Rajasthan, Tunisia, Canada, obviously. We've got some really interesting projects coming up in the coming years, one very exciting one coming up this spring. And we're all volunteers in the organization. The goal is to give young people an opportunity to learn on an adventure on an even playing field with the others that are selected. They're selected through an application process, and them share their adventures through satellite technology with classrooms all over the world. So we'll get tens of thousands of students patching in from classrooms following these kids. They get a chance to sort of connect through technology and beyond the expedition by virtue of technology.
And I'm sure that the students that you select to actually go on the expeditions, that must have such a profound impact on them. Do they come from adventuring or hiking or running backgrounds, or do you train them to be able to cope with the environments you're going to put them in?
So I don't get to select the youth ambassadors. Our executive director and our youth ambassador alumni are the ones that select the next group that goes. But these kids come from all different backgrounds, all over the world. Economy or economics, sex, religion, none of these things, geography, where you come from, none of these things have a bearing on being selected as a youth ambassador. So many times on expeditions, you'll have kids from opposite ends of the economical spectrum on the same expedition. Right? And so there is no selection criteria based in that. And therefore there isn't on sport. I mean, look at if it's a running-based expedition like the one we did in Tunisia where they were running huge distances daily. Yes, they got to sort of have an interest in running and show an interest in running and have done some running. But for the most part, on most of the expeditions, once they're selected based on the merits of the questions that are being asked in the application process, which changes every time, we provide them with all of the training, the gear, everything they need, nutritional counseling, strength training and functionality, everything they need to be able to accomplish their mission.
Wow.
Do you get many kids who drop out, or they just get 2 days in and they're thinking, what? This isn't for me. Do you have to do a lot of sort of on-trail counseling?
No, I would say less so. I mean, they're generally pretty stoked to be there. I think the hardest thing is when an injury comes up and they have to reinvent their role on the expeditions. That's happened many times. But I tell you, in the time when the tears are rolling down the face and they can't complete the run and they have to find that other role to support their teammates and be still an integral member of the team, in that moment is when I always remind them, you're going to look back at this someday. And this is the reason why really your ability to overcome this is going to pay dividends huge later on in your life, right? And sure enough, that resiliency follows through with them. I mean, we've seen so many of these youth ambassadors go on to do amazing things. And I have a guiding business as well called Capic One, where I take people back to the places I've been for a 1-week expedition. We just did one in the Atacama Desert. I teach people how to navigate, and then they halfway through take over navigation. And then they run through the desert and mountains, and they're leading me to the expedition, right? Well, I've got youth ambassadors from Impossible to Possible who are now helping me to guide adults. So I'm headed to Siberia with one of my youth ambassadors at the end of February with a group that are going to be crossing part of Lake Baikal.
Can you think of maybe one of those people, like one of the most miraculous stories of change that you've ever had in the program?
Well, there's been many, but we've had First Nations youth. We had a young man, Brandon Sands, from Northern Canada, and he came from First Nations community, and, he had a rough go of it, and he started, he was in Expedition Bolivia, if I remember correctly, and he was just this amazing guy that was so intelligent and just needed to see in himself how awesome he was. And he went to Bolivia with all these other youth, and they ended up crossing the Bolivian Altiplano. They taught a curriculum of chemistry, which was tied to the expedition, to thousands of students around the world. And then, he went home and we stayed in touch. But I mean, it's hard to stay in touch with all of them. And then a few years later, I was on a flight somewhere and I opened up this airline magazine and I see that Brandon is speaking at this big Meet a We conference with thousands of kids. Like, he's the one that's inspiring them now. So it was transformational for sure.
I mean, we've seen that in a bunch of, athletes that we coach. Just, again, it's that impossible to possible, right? People that come to us thinking there's no way in hell can I do this, or to the capacity that you think I can, and just holding their hand and being a team around them to help them through their fear and through the ups and downs, and just kind of being unconditional for them. And it's an amazing feeling to take people on, because I think so many people now are just filled with fear. And unfortunately, that's a huge part, I think, of our American culture here, is that fear-mongering, right? Everyone's scared to fall down, and I think they don't have that social network around them of real people to get them back up again, and that's one of the biggest problems.
And not just fear of themselves or being in discomfort, but fear of other cultures as well. I mean, you talk about going to places in the world where you don't know how safe they are, you don't know,
We're told messages all the time about the way the world is from our media, and that's what's so nice to hear about what you've done, Ray, is just getting out there, meeting all these people, seeing the realness of it.
You have to consider this. There's two thoughts based on what we were just talking about here, but we underestimate ourselves and we overthink things. That's what human beings do. We overcomplicate and overthink things, right? People always ask me, so do you ever think about this, or do you think about that, or when you've had scary moments on expeditions before? I'm like, no. I'm not focusing on, obviously, I learned from things in the past, but I'm focused on what I'm doing now and where I'm headed, right? And really, it's building resiliency that, you got one kick at the can, one shot at life, right? If we're lucky, what's the average, 78 years lifespan? I mean, every single day is one day less. And it doesn't mean you got to go climb Mount Everest or anything like that. But I mean, in each and every one of us should be the desire to want to find something in our day-to-day that at least makes us happy, right? And that drives us forward. And if you hit the jackpot and you're able to find the thing that you're truly passionate about and make a difference in the lives of others, well, then you're just cranking it, right? And what else can you ask for? It doesn't matter how much money you've got in your bank account when you die. If your goal is to have $1 billion and that's your goal, then awesome. But really, at the end of the day, when you're laying on your deathbed, you want to be able to look back and say, okay, it doesn't mean you had to go to the moon, but you want to be able to look back and say, I did some shit I'm proud about. Whether it's raising your kids or whatever it is, you want to be able to say to yourself in that moment, when it's done and it's time to look back, right? When you're done, and there's only one way to look, which is back, you want to be able to be satisfied. I think that's critical. And then the other thing you brought up was that the world, look at 99% of the world lives just like we do. The images that we see of the way people are portrayed and the way we're, especially now, it seems, supposed to be afraid of one another is just not the way it is. It's just not. Everybody around the world laughs at the same jokes. We all find the same things funny. We all want the same things for our families, which is a better life than we had for our kids. We're more similar than we are different. And I think in a cruel way, the images that we are shared on a day-to-day basis do not tell that story. One of the most amazing countries that I went through where the people were so nice was Libya. I've been to Libya a number of times. People were amazing. They were amazing. Like, I mean, it's just generous and kind and everything else. It's a lot of times it's leadership in these countries where everybody's crazy. It's not the people.
Yeah.
People are people.
And I think we do have a lot more in common with people than we might think, even though we have different skin colors, we speak different languages and so on. But your point was really interesting about the sort of the laying on your deathbed, how do you want to look back on your life? Because it was interesting in psychology, particularly in health coaching and psychology, where you're trying to get people to change their behaviors. One strategy that's used commonly by therapists is based on a principle called anticipated regret. And so what you do is you ask people to anticipate the regret that they might have in life, either for doing certain things or not doing certain things. And you get them to almost like reimagine what it feels like to have gone through life without doing those things. And it seems remarkably potent as a strategy for helping people change. And you're finding this organically, and you found that, and I think that's a really good selling point, particularly when you're talking to younger people. How do I do things that are difficult, that are challenging, that are scary? And it's not just about the experience then and there, it's about what you want your life to have been about. And I think that's such a strong and powerful message.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And, you know, I got to tell you something else is that, again, as human beings, we overcomplicate, like, the meaning of life, for example, right? Like, we overcomplicate purpose in life. We overcomplicate everything. At the end of the day, being happy, truly being able to look at yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, you know what? I'm actually really happy today. I have this one thing to be happy for. And a strategy that I've used that you're going to have heard of this many times before is at the end of every single day before I go to sleep, I remind myself of 3 things that I'm thankful or grateful for that happened during the day. It could be something totally random. Like, I'm super grateful that my coffee was really hot this morning, right? Whatever. But it's finding the joy in the smallest of things. And the better you become at finding that happiness in even these little things, the more accepting you become of finding happiness in the bigger things in your life.
You know what's super interesting is we're talking at a very high level, of course, about happiness or passion or all these great, wonderful things at a big level that have happened to you. But what was fascinating to me was just looking through your Twitter account and seeing what it is that you pack for an excursion, right? When you're off on an adventure, and the sort of structure and simplicity of putting together this step by step. And I think that most people look to folks like you and I, for example, as, wow, as Simon said, I could never do that. But it all starts with one tiny little step, and it all breaks down into these little micro things, you know, that build up gradually to become this bigger thing. So I'm kind of interested in your views on that.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, you know, everything starts with a step. I've said to people, I wrote a post recently, I can't remember, some social media somewhere, where I said, you know, the great adventures are the ones we're the most passionate about, and the greatest challenges in life that we face typically provide the greatest rewards. And that doesn't mean, again, necessarily climbing Everest or going to Kona or whatever it is, right? It can mean getting off the friggin' couch. Right? So for some people, that is a huge thing to take those first steps. As you said, being afraid or whatever. Taking the first steps into anything that's unknown and uncomfortable. But your brain tells you you want to go there, right? That your heart tells you you want to go wherever it is and try something, whatever it is that it may be, that will eventually provide you with that happiness. But it starts with the first steps. You can't get anywhere unless you take the first steps. Problem is, we're not sitting on the couch. We're not thinking, okay, just if I can walk to my mailbox and back, that's day one. That's not what people are thinking. They're thinking, I can't run 5K. Well, you don't have to run 5K. You know what I mean? Movement, any movement is a positive direction. You know, it's a positive direction.
Absolutely. I would even say that happiness and the pursuit of happiness depends on suffering. In fact, I think that, in some of the research in the psychology of happiness, there's this deficit model we've spoken about on other episodes, and that really to experience happiness, and that's a can of worms itself, how you define that. But often it takes for you to be without, to experience discomfort, or to have the exact antithesis of happiness for you to really appreciate what you have. And I guess that's partly what gratitude journaling is doing. We had an author on a couple of weeks ago called Brad Stulberg, and one of his really nice little perspectives on gratitude is, and this is about passion and ties into passion and happiness, was that it's really the skill of noticing, not finding. And this is, I think, where the gratitude journaling that you're referring to fits into nicely. So we aren't looking for these big, grandiose, audacious things to notice. It's the small things in life that can help us connect with who we are. And it keeps us mindful as well. And we know that that's a really great path towards contentment and mental health. So gratitude journaling is such a great stuff. So you've been doing that, have you, for a long period?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said before, a strategy. When I started this whole thing, for the first 30 years of my life also, I was inside a very unhappy person. But outside to everybody else and all my friends, I'm the life of the party. But I genuinely was not being honest with myself, and I wasn't a happy person. I had to work at being happy. Being happy is a challenge all on its own. I mean, being satisfied with oneself is a massive challenge that I'm sure so many of your listeners understand, right? So, at the end of the day, if you can get over that first step and teach yourself to be happy, because being unhappy generally in life, like, oh, it's cloudy out today, it's probably going to rain. Or you can wake up and say, it's cloudy out today, at least I don't have to put on that SPF today. It's a good day, right? So, even though you should put on SPF when it's, you get the point of what I'm trying to say. So the thing is, the glass half full is a lot more difficult in the beginning until you become practiced than the glass half empty. Glass half empty is like slipping into a warm sleeping bag. It's cozy sometimes being negative, right? But being positive and looking for those small things, like I said, at the end of your day, just looking for a few good things. There's got to be something. Just focus on the one little thing, that 5 minutes of your 24-hour period that were actually the bright spot. You focus on that. That's what you start with. And then eventually that 5 minutes turns into 20 and it turns into an hour. And lo and behold, over a period of time, you start looking at things not being so bad. But resilience is a huge component. It's a huge part of that as well. And you learn resiliency, and resiliency comes again, like everything else in life. You got to practice at it. And I also believe, and you may think this sounds flaky, I believe in karma, but I believe in that if we are truly living in the direction of being passionate in our lives, or finding passion in our lives, things that we're truly happy about and that we're driven to do, that this law of attraction sort of applies and you pull more positivity towards you. I believe that. You'll end up surrounding yourself with positive people, and you just mechanically live in that direction. And then you look back, 10 years go by, and you look back, you go, wow, I can't believe where I was when I started this journey 10 years ago.
But you know what? So many people are obsessed with the outcome. They see the social media posts, they see the big adventures, so to speak, and the completion of those, and they think that that's what they have to do, and they don't look at the step-by-step, right? They don't look at the process and see that that is where the value is. And we come across
a lot of people, sorry to interrupt you, a lot of people look on Instagram at the six-pack and know they're never going to have that six-pack. Instead of just going to the gym and working out, for example, to feel good, just to feel good, right? To feel healthier. Who cares about the Instagram picture with the six-pack? Who cares, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's finding in your life the things that drive you personally. I was having this discussion with someone the other day about adventure and doing things that you want to do because you want to do them, because they make you happy. Going on a ski trip somewhere, and it's not the most epic thing, but it's what you want to do. It's not about the Instagram photo or the Facebook story that goes with it. It's all about how you feel about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't enter an Ironman and train for a year to do an Ironman because you want the photo of you crossing the timer banner at the end, going through the tape with your hands up in the air. That's not why you do it. You do it because of the process, because of everything it's going to give you, and hopefully you get to the finish line that day. And if you kill it in your age group or you win Ironman Kona, then wow, even better.
But clearly you have a tremendous amount of intrinsic motivation, obviously running for 111 days across the Sahara. But in 2009, you walked 650 kilometers to the South Pole with no skis, which is, the first part of the sentence is shocking. The second part is even more shocking. And then you did it in 33 days and you pulling a sled. And I think you broke the world speed record to get there. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience or what you learned along the way? Because that is just phenomenal.
I think it was about 650 miles. 3 of us went to the geographic South Pole. The only reason I went on snowshoes was because my 2 buddies, my teammates, we all went together. They're really good skiers, like elite national level cross-country skiers. And I'm a good skier, but I'm not their level of skier. So I thought, well, what the hell? I know I can keep up to them on foot, right? So I'll just go without skis. So it wasn't even something that I had planned to be some big to-do. I did it because it was going to be easier for me, that's right. But, honestly,
right.
The South Pole, it had its difficult times, but we had such a great time together, the 3 of us. It was, from memory, I don't want to say like it was one of the more comfortable expeditions I'd say that I've done, because we had such great camaraderie and we had such a great time. We were laughing every night in the tent. And it was 33 awesome days. I mean, it just was a great trip. And there's been other trips where things are so much more heinous. And they're just, every day's a struggle. But you find the bright spots in those too. Like when I crossed the Namib Desert, I did that with a teammate, with Stefano Gregoretti from Italy. 1,850 kilometers we ran across the desert from South Africa to Angola in the middle of summer. And it was brutal. It was brutal for multiple reasons. The terrain was difficult. There was always a canyon or something in the way. It was oppressively hot. It was just really, really difficult. Every day was a struggle, but we got through it together.
How does your wife and family deal with you being away for these long stretches and the risk of it all? And how do you deal with it yourself personally in terms of, whether it's guilt or any other kind of emotion like that?
The hardest part of my job is being away from my family, obviously. We have a lot of fun together. We love doing stuff together. As I mentioned, my daughters, they're into cross-country skiing. They're both really good skiers. The 11-year-old has done biathlon. They paddle K1 and C1 in the summer. They mountain bike. They like to do it all. We live in a place that you can, like in the town in Chelsea, Quebec, where we live. Like, it's sort of a multi-sport community. My wife also, she's an environmental engineer and a consultant, but her passion's ultra running. And so once a year, we go away and she does some major race and we get our friends together and we all go and we crew her. And this year she finished second at the Moab 240 and we were so proud of her, but it's a family thing, right? So my girls, since they were born, know that this is daddy's job. It's normal to them. It's nothing, any different than any of the other dads that I know at the school where the kids go. We all just have jobs, right? And this just happens to be my weird job to them, but it's my job. And mommy is very inspiring to them because she goes out and does these ultra marathons. So we normalize it, though, in our house, right?
So your kids don't know any different, right? They think this is just what families do.
Yeah, to them it's like, okay, so we're going for a 10K run today, trail run or whatever it is that we're going to do. We'll load up the car and go down to the Adirondacks, which is very close to us, and spend 2 days in the mountains. Normal for them, and you have good days and bad days when they're young, but whatever, right? And so to them, it's normal, though. It's not unusual to climb Whiteface Mountain and go down again. It's not out of the realm of normalness. Great
that you get to spend that time with your kids. I mean, Simon and I don't have children yet, or if. But yeah, you just sort of see a lot of friends and parents that don't spend that kind of time with their kids. And it just seems like it would be such an amazing bonding experience.
It's to each his own. I mean, everybody's got their own style. And for me, look at being a dad, that was something I always knew I wanted to do. I've done so many things in my life that I'm not proud of. But, being a dad is the one that I'm the most proud of. It's just something that I always wanted to be, right? And I'm lucky that my job affords me, and when I'm gone away for extended periods of time on expedition, 50, 60 days, when I'm home around the clock. I do speak around the world for corporations and stuff like that. That's how I pay the bills. But those trips are very quick. And my wife, her job takes up a lot of time. She's super busy. She works really hard. We just find the balance by supporting one another as best we can. And there's ups and downs, as there is in everyone's life. But, life is what you make it.
Right. Are your kids ever embarrassed? Oh, Dad, enough. Yes, we know. They're outdoors kids themselves. But do you ever embarrass your children with your adventure follies?
I really don't. I mean, bedtime stories.
Sure,
they want to know. They want to know what animals I've been chased by, or all the bad things. They want to know those stories. But it's not really because all my friends that I hang out with. This goes to what we were talking about before. How you sort of get on a path, you living your life in a certain direction, and there's that law of attraction. I mean, most of my friends are amazing trail runners and skiers and mountain bikers and climbers, and they all kind of live a similar lifestyle. Many of them.
Do you think, I think there could be a lot of people listening that wouldn't know even where to start in terms of what is an adventure? How do I begin on this path that sounds super fascinating, but I'm scared to shit? Where can I go to find out how to begin this journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I have to say, I mean, being in the U.S., the national parks and state parks, it is ridiculous how many, I forget what the statistic is, but there are so many accessible wilderness areas not far from major cities, right? But even at that, you find adventure in your own backyard in any way possible. And again, it doesn't have to be running an ultramarathon. It can be anything in life that you're passionate about, writing a book, painting a picture, or learning a new riff on your guitar, whatever it is. You take the first step in any capacity with anything that it is you want to do. So you're working as a store clerk, and you decide that you want to be a fireman. So what do? What's the first step? Well, logically, the first step is you research it. You Google it, right? You go on Google it. How do I become a firefighter? And one step, one thing after another leads you to that process. And maybe you become a firefighter someday. It's the same thing with adventure and with getting moving. It just takes a little bit of reading, a little bit of time, and just putting one foot in front of the other and not trying to build Rome in a day, because it's not going to happen. You just have to do things sequentially, one little bit at a time.
But then the confidence
and
builds.
Before you know it, but it's exponential. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you got to spend forever. You go at your own pace. It's making the decision in the affirmative to move forward. People ask me sometimes, on the days when I'm on expedition and I wake up in my tent, which, trust me, in 2 weeks from now when I'm in the Arctic, I'm going to be thinking this. I'm going to wake up in my tent and I'm going to be like, there is no way I'm going out there today. It's not happening, right? And the whole time I'm saying this, I'm lighting my stove and I'm making my coffee and I'm saying to myself, no way I'm getting out of this sleeping bag as I'm packing the sleeping bag up. And there's no way I'm taking this tent down as I'm undoing the pegs. There's no way I'm going down to that next valley as I'm strapping on my skis, and then you're moving. You go on autopilot. You just make it happen. You have made
That's some really good psychology there.
It's yes or no, right? You make it a decision in the affirmative. It's not, the question isn't, do I really feel like running in the cold with these sore feet and going another 50K today? No, that's not, you know what the question is? Are you going to run today? Or are you going to sit here? Are you going to go or not? It's totally distilled down to a simple decision. Yes or no. And once you decide yes, then you take the first step.
What's interesting there is I love the way that you describe the sort of the internal dialogue of, no, I won't, it's too cold. But behaviorally, you're preparing anyway. You're doing the things, your little ritual to get ready. But no, I'm still not going out there. So there can be a mismatch between what you're doing and what you're thinking. And guess what actually wins the day? It's the doing, right? Because before you know it, you've suited up, you've had your coffee, you've had breakfast, and then the next step is just put one foot outside the door and get going. And that seems to be great. You don't have to quieten the chatter.
It's internal venting. You're letting your brain go off and tell you that you shouldn't be doing this, you don't want to be doing this, you're not going to do this. And the other part of you is like, you know what, I'll keep quiet for now, but brain, I am doing this. and I'm going to start getting ready.
Right.
And one thing leads to another. And before you know it, you're doing it.
Are there any myths that you, in adventuring, that you spend your time trying to debunk frequently for people who perhaps are not in that world or don't have those sorts of activities they do in their leisure time?
Oh, my favorite one is running is bad for your knees. Running is bad for you. There's an entire industry around healing you before you even take your first steps running, like mitigating injury. Here's a news flash. Running is really good for your cardiovascular health. Running is really good for bone density. Running is really good for a lot of things. It's a lot better for you than it is not good for you. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's a myth right there. So right away, when we are bombarded with that messaging constantly, our preconceived notion of running is that it's just really not the best thing for us. It's really not good for you, running, all this running. That's just not the fact. You just don't overdo it. Go to what your capacity is, right? And then running is a great thing for you. Every time I'm on expedition, on these really long ones, I'm always amazed that I'm able to finish, you know? Because every time I go out, I'm like, there's no way I can run 3,000 kilometers. But as the old African proverb says, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And you learn that your body is capable of so much more than you think it is. And as I said with the marathon runner who crawls, or the Ironman triathlete who crawls across the finish line, or you're running a marathon and you twist your ankle for one reason, stepping off a curb. And if you were at home on a training day, you'd crawl back home. But no, sir, you're in the marathon. You're going to finish the damn marathon, right? With that ankle, with your foot hanging off your ankle. We can rise to an amazing level of challenge as human beings.
There's quite a subtle distinction there that you picked up on, that you can start an activity or an endeavor without thinking that you might finish, but you're still going to try anyway. Because I think many people start, oh, well, if I don't think I could do it, I'm not even going to even try. But you have this opinion as, oh, there's no way I can do that, but I'll take the first day, or I'll take the first 10 kilometers or what have you. And then you segment this in your own head. And that obviously, as we know, the neuroscience research tells us now about how some of these neurotransmitters reinforce that. After a while, oh, I've done that, I might as well continue a bit more. And then the snowball is rolling for motivation, and you can do far more than you thought you could. And it's okay to start something not thinking that you might finish it.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. And the biggest challenge, the greatest challenge, is making the decision in the affirmative to go. That's always the hardest part. Is the pool cold? Are you going to dip your toes in, or are you just going to jump in? I say jump in and get it over with, right? So you make the decision to just go for it and let the chips fall where they may. You've prepared the best you can. You've done everything you can. You've applied all the previous knowledge from previous things that you've done. You go for it now. And the more you do the decision, the more you're willing to take the decision or make the risk or take the risk, the better you get at, and the more increased chances of success you have. Well, because you become confident.
Yeah, I think, it's so interesting because social media now, with all the pictures that you see people, you see the pictures of the finish line. You don't necessarily see the picture of you, I don't know, shitting your pants out on a training run, right? It's all the glory of it all. And so that's why I think more and more people are like, well, I can't even start because I can't see the finish, because that's all they're seeing in their images that are projected around social media and what have you. So, it's that step by step that is the beauty of it all, and the only way to get to the finish.
But process isn't sexy, is it? The journey is not so sexy to people. They just want the accolades and the outcome. And it's like, how do you get lost in the process and learn that that's the reward? And even if you don't make it to the end, it doesn't make it a worthless exercise.
From an evolutionary perspective, we have not changed much in 5-10 years since the advent of social media. So people have always been doing amazing things, and nobody knew about it except for the friends that they would call on the telephone, not even their cell phone, or the people that they would write a letter to and tell them about this amazing journey that they just had, right? You did it because you wanted to, and because you're passionate about doing it. And that's something that's, I think, is so important for people to know. Do things for you. Don't do things for others for you. By meaning, do things for others as in helping other people. That's not what I'm getting at. Do things for how it makes you feel, not how you think it makes others feel about you. It's so hard for people to take those first steps into that.
Yeah, no, totally. No, I get it. And Okay, so this is a totally random question and something I kind of wanted to finish off with, but what is the weirdest food that you've either had to eat or chosen to eat on one of your adventures?
Well, in Mongolia, I had fermented mare's milk, which is kind of like it's horse milk and it's fermented. And so it naturally becomes alcoholic. And that was not my favorite thing that I've ever consumed. I'd have to say that's pretty bad.
Just put a bit of Canadian maple syrup with it. It'll be grand.
Yeah. It's just, I tell you, it's just really, that was something else.
Well, Ray, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. You're an inspiration to many, not just because your fearless ability to go into the unknown, but also how you combine the educational mission of what you do as well. So we really appreciate you taking a time out of your hectic and exhausting and probably muddy and sweaty life to spend it with us for an hour on the XTERRA podcast.
Well, thank you guys so much. I truly enjoyed it. And I would encourage all of your listeners to, if there is that goal that you have or that dream that you have and you're thinking in yourself, oh, there's no way I could ever get there. The first step is eliminating those thoughts and just willing it, making it happen, taking that first step and taking a risk and taking a chance.
Totally.
Thank you so much, Ray. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Ray. All right, buddy, from one crazy person to the next. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And if you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe.
If you want to learn more, head over to XTERRAplanet.com. There you can register for your next off-road race, learn more about this podcast, and find some amazing gear. If you have questions or comments, you can email us at podcast@XTERRAplanet.com.
And if you're interested in learning more about how to master your brain for endurance sports, we've written a book.
It's called The Brave Athlete and is available everywhere they sell books.
And we even have an audiobook. In fact, we narrate it.
Yes, that's not exactly a great selling point.